Welcome to Portals of Perception and to Evolving Together, episode 6, where we explore how we humans evolve together. Well, Nigel, welcome.
Hi.
Well, here is where we are in our evolutionary adventure. I emailed you a couple of days ago asking what are you discovering anew about evolving together, and what new insights are you unlocking about the small and large scale of evolving together. And part of the underlying awareness in this is that we are each person, first of all, a community of lives unto ourselves. So in some sense, that's our first togethering, the individuated togethering. And then for most of us, there is the close-in circle. Often it's a family, so there is a second togethering in the familial bond that we constitute. And then there is, thirdly, the various other togetherings, small and large communal formations that we may participate in, and they may be one central one, or there may be several, and they may be more intensive or less intensive. And then there is the fourth togethering, which is the large scale. And some may say there is no togethering there at all, but I mean the city, the region, the nation, global networks, if you like, humanity at large. And then there is a fifth kind of togethering, which is the sense of us humans together with what we sometimes describe as the more than human, invisible blessing realms. So when I say what are we learning about togethering, I invite all of those 5 dimensions and more wherever you want to go. So who is ready to get us started, please?
I can come in, Aviv?
Please.
Yep. I've been trying to listen to what is emerging in life itself with me. And it often happens in very curious and strange ways. And I'll give an example. Recently, I happened upon a practice that's been going on in the counties of Derbyshire and Staffordshire in England for a very long time. It's a practice called well dressing. And of course, having chosen the name well, it kind of had a certain resonance. And so I finally got to the point where I thought, well, I'd like to know something about this. And then a whole series of things started to happen. And we eventually found ourselves talking to some people who were actually doing it. We had a visitor from Germany with us, and we went and spoke to them and watched what they were doing and found out a bit more about it. And what's interesting is it comes from a fundamental gratefulness for water, and the fact that back in the old days, the wells in the village were an essential service for life. They didn't have piped water back in those days. So the water arriving in the village was essential to their lives. Yeah. And they had a gratefulness for that, and they wanted to pay back for it and to give some resonance from them back to whatever calls for water. So what they would do is make murals out of natural materials, flower petals and all sorts of things, colourful murals, and put the murals on the wells as a community act in celebration of the water coming to them. And it's rather a nice thing. But what caught me about it when I was talking to the people is how it brings them together in something that's basically healthy. And it's also humanly creative. And somehow humans giving their creativity back to the creativity of life itself seem to have a significance. So I'll start there as a place to have an inroad into all this. Yeah.
Yes. You're describing, first of all, in yourself, a sense of located openness and curiosity to life itself in the way it presents itself to you, around you, in some of the most obvious or the least obvious, all of the above ways. And then you're describing a practice where you are highlighting a sense of gratefulness, one that brings people together around a shared value, around a shared practice and perhaps ritual. I don't know, would you describe it as a ritual? Is there a utilitarian value in what they do, or this is purely adornment and beautifying something that they attach shared value to?
I think it is more like that, yes. I don't think it's a ritual as such, though obviously, probably religious practices have climbed on board, but I don't think it comes from that. I think it's more of a genuine gratefulness for life itself and what it offers,
What else would you offer by way of observing and detecting in them and in yourself this kind of gratefulness?
Well, I think it's probably where evolution actually begins, from the idea of giving back for what life gives us. So that's the first thing that really strikes me about it. And also the fact that because we are creative beings, we have something to offer from ourselves that is different to what previously existed and has evolved automatically, perhaps over many billions of years. We have something to give back. And the fact of people wanting to come together to give back, and the sense of community that brings with it, that's what caught me. Very interesting.
Can you take me on the mental journey, the contemplative journey that's behind the proposal you're making, that evolution begins with giving back, with gratefulness? There is a leap there that I need assistance with. How do you configure this arising sense and perception, really, that life, the way life shows itself up to you, is that evolution begins with giving back and with the act of gratefulness. Take me on that journey, please.
Okay. Well, if you think about it, life itself started somewhere. And the whole journey of the evolution of life has added value to the creation that it emerged in. Life has become more intricate, more interesting, more capable, more responsive in all sorts of different ways as the journey of evolution has gone on. And there's a whole story inside that. But clearly, for me, the whole journey of that is a journey of things coming together to offer a better response, in all sorts of ways. And we're a shining example of that in the human form. There's all sorts of things working together in us, different organs, for example, different capabilities, from the brain to the blood system to everything else, that makes it possible for us to respond in a more versatile way than most forms of life before us. And especially so in the sense that we are ourselves creative. We are ourselves also conscious. And so we're offering back a different kind of gifting to what any form of life before has been able to offer. And it's a very, very interesting point in the evolution of life. Say another thing, that each human life that emerges, though it's based on the same model, is original, unique. There's never been one like it before. And so that in itself is a micro-evolution of life. It's a new appearance, offering something different. And then when people start getting together, particularly consciously, wanting to give life itself a better future, which I think fundamentally all human beings do want to do, when that starts to happen, then you've got a different kind of engagement with evolution to anything that's been previously possible. So I think I'd say that about it as a grounding.
Yes. So there is an interesting and curious distinction that's emerging through the way you're painting this perception and this sense, because the reductionist, materialist, scientific narrative would say, when they try to reason consciousness, there is a description of a random process that complexified over time. So there is there too an element of connecting part to part, but it has almost a chance or a random or mechanistic sense to it. I don't get the feeling that that's what you're describing. I get the feeling that when you are describing the sense of life coming together to discover more of itself, that there is a almost primordial or emergent, right from the outset, the property of value and the property of, as you said, giving back, gratefulness, that is not something that's appearing later, but rather is part of the intrinsic nature of life, and that it is that nature that emancipates and animates the teleology of life to find the more of itself coming together rather than less. There is a subtle distinction, because I'm saying reductionist science would almost offer a similar story, just would extract completely any sense of value and the sentiment that you are describing that's intrinsic to life. What would you say to that?
Well, curiously enough, I was trained as a scientist. That was my education, you know. But my interest in it always was in really understanding more about life itself and what was going on in it. So I had a natural curiosity that science was part of the exploration of, you know? And science itself really only exists because people are seeking to understand more about life, you know? And there is a value in that. There's all sorts of value in that. Interestingly, I recently, just the other day, picked up a book from Richard Dawkins, for example, which I'm sure you would have run across in your travels. And one thing that interests me about the man is his incredible passion, that comes through in what he does. And for me, that's the passion of life, speaking through the man. The fact that he has come to the views he has is another matter. And we need a whole variety of views in this world to get to the deeper truth of things. That's my view. Mm-hmm. So I admire his passion, but I don't agree with his views. That's how I put it, I think.
Yeah, beautiful. Another adjacent way of framing that is to say that you don't need to embark on a spiritual journey to have one. You can be a total denier and disbeliever of the fact that you're actually a spirit being in the human experience, and you will still have a spiritual journey because your spirit is actually experiencing life through the medium of that kind of an experience. In other words, you do not need to embark on a journey to have a spiritual experience. You're in it all the time. Beautiful. So Nigel, let me bring you in on this. Is there anything you want to offer
Yes.
to the starter?
Yes. Firstly, a couple of notations on route, because Well started with talking about water and well. And one of the things I've trained my brain to do is to do anagrams as a way of unlocking the meaning in words. And I note that water is we art. So it's the art of coming together. And well speaks about we LL, whatever that means. So it's that was just a notation en route, really. Yes. You were speaking about appearing on this planet and ultimately giving back. But it seems like the first journey in life is being born into a family that provides all of one's needs. So the first part of life is not one of giving back, but one of taking everything that you need in order to be able to grow and mature into whatever your potential might be. And it seems like the giving back happens later, after the time of puberty, when another feature in the first chapter of life is it seems like there's not much self-consciousness, and that consciousness flowers after puberty in whatever faculty one has then. And the journey then becomes more of fashioning the we of oneself in relationship with others. And it seems like it's integral to the uplifting of ourselves, the connection with others. And slight detour. I woke up the other morning wanting to hear Led Zeppelin. So I put it on, I listened to it, and it was brilliant. I mean, it's more than 50 years old, but it felt perfect. And it left me wondering, what if those four people had never come together and have a state of affairs between them that allowed something else that hadn't been here before to appear? And it was like, it happens in the give and take between us that something else is possible. Yeah, and it's the same with how our life is triggered by the conjunction of sperm and egg, which is that it's a coming together. And somehow, in the coming together, something else can hit its hand in there. Because sexual reproduction it's totally different to asexual reproduction. Because asexual reproduction only reproduces history or what went before. But sexual reproduction, in the bringing together of two things that are designed to be together, it somehow liberates something else. Otherwise, we would each be replicas of our parents, and we're not, thankfully. I mean, I had great parents, but yeah. So it leads me into the naturalness of the journey of coming together with others, and somehow that allowing the coming together in myself at the same time. It's like I might think, oh, I need to pull myself together or get myself together before I can engage with others, but that doesn't seem to work. It's in the communion with others and the sharing and what goes with that I build the communion of myself and the orchestra of myself. Because it's not enough to just come together. It's like, yes, you can bring things together, but that can be a cacophony. It needs the ordering or the orchestration and the balancing of the parts to bring oneself into a community.
So you're making several distinctions. The first distinction you're making is that life naturally is seeking to come together. The attraction of the sperm and the ovum to come together and birth the possibility of life is the evidence of that. There is something about life that has that built-in impulse, desire to come together.
Right, but also it's part of the human design or the human nature, is it can bring things together.
Yes.
I don't see that in other organic life.
Right, so your distinction one is that's the nature of life. Then you observe that actually the giving back is more a phase that's evolving after the taking all that you need in the first phase or the first self of you. And thirdly, you're saying that your third distinction is in you saying, actually, it doesn't work that I need to first get myself together now. I get myself together when I get together with others. It's almost as though you're saying, not to put words in your mouth, but let's see if you agree with this way of perceiving what you're saying. It's almost as though you're saying, well, parts of me are with others. So therefore, I can only fully get together when I find myself with others because they afford me the parts of myself that I can only get through our togethering, in which there is an uplift and a realization, and including the celebration of value as well described in the well-dressing practice.
Yes, but also a challenge. I mean, just an hour before this call, my daughter rang me up to recount the difficulties of family and between families that she's facing at the moment. And it reminded me that whilst we're designed this way, it seems, it's not easy. It's not automatic. It calls for me to face myself with others.
Well, so let me ask you to further this, because the thread I held from the opening from Well was this sense of opening curiosity that leads to value how life appears in the first place. And in where you just led us in the conversation now, Nigel, you're describing the value of togethering and also the facing and the challenge of it. So what would you say about this polarity, that it is something you cherish and value, and it is also something that brings a challenge? What is the insight? What is the revelation there? Are these a polarity, or actually the value is in the very nature and character of the facing that is involved in coming together?
Well, in the reflection from others, I get more of the reality of myself, not to dismiss the reality that I already contain. Yeah, the reflection from others is not an easy process, but it does allow me to value the struggle and to value them because they present a struggle that I wouldn't have on my own, or not so obviously.
And the value.
So it does build value, but in a not obvious way. Yeah.
What else would you say about the character, the nature of the value that's emerging through facing, through struggle, through overcoming difficulties? How do you codify that kind of value in your own process, in your own awareness?
Yeah. Often, well, one of the places it takes me is reflections on the conflicts and difficulties in the world, where it looks like there's an outward struggle, and yes, there is. But it seems like the real struggle for any of us is to rise in self, which means bringing the positive and the negative of oneself in close proximity to both squeeze oneself higher, but also petition higher, and petition, higher qualities, really. And it seems like the struggle is always an internal one in which others can assist. And it doesn't always seem like assistance at the point.
Indeed. Well, anything you want to bring into these observations before I take us on another foray?
Well, Nigel, you reminded me of being in a field with 250,000 people listening to Led Zeppelin live. And there's a hell of an energy with it.
Yeah.
And what is it that brings 250,000 people together in a field with, in those days, no facilities of any kind, just being together for a couple of days in a field listening to music, you know? So there's a very powerful urge in people to do this, you know? And that was one example, both in small and in large. You know, that's one thing that I would reflect. Clearly, we grow through the difficulties we face if we're able to get through them.
Yeah. And
we offer each other enormous opportunities for growth. When we're able, particularly when we're able to be honest and direct with each other, rather than doing what the English do so very well, and that is to be polite about everything and pretend that they're not irritated at all, which is often not the case. So there is a necessary honesty in facing in oneself. For example, when when I get disgruntled these days for whatever reason, I try and look at it, not to punish myself about it, but to try and understand what the hell is going on. And it's often triggered by external things. But the interesting thing is, what is it really about? And the more I get into that, the more it helps me to be more invested in the currency of life and less invested in what has come to prevent and restrict life in all of us. So that's what it prompts in me at this point.
So you're describing the 250,000 people coming together for a couple, 3 days concert. And it brings a question about the significance of these large kind of gatherings, large events or large rallies, or the gathering in a pilgrimage of some kind, or some kind of a large religious revival gathering. Where do you place in your weave of experiences those kind of large gatherings, small or large gatherings, but they seem to be around some kind of either somebody on stage performing wonderful music, or some other person leading the celebration around a religious context? Where do you place that kind of dimension and experience inside your map of togetherings that we get to experience in this planetary journey?
One thing I'd say is that when people get together for something rather than against something, that offers a much better opportunity. And when they get together spontaneously, motivated by something that's coming through, that draws people together so that something can happen, that produces the most extraordinary results. I mean, if you've ever watched a documentary, for example, about Woodstock, the original Woodstock, it's quite an extraordinary story. Nobody was in control. And yet somehow people worked together. Even the local people and the military and all sorts of people worked together to make it possible. And it was an extraordinary occurrence. Couldn't be replicated in the same way in the future. But something happened there that changed the world. And so when people do come together in that special way, extraordinary things become possible. I really would hope that into the future, particularly with media like the internet now available, that we can learn to come together more in that spontaneous, life-affirming way that will give opportunity to what evolution is trying to cause in us. That's just what I would prefer.
Yeah, it's curious. I mean, obviously they try to replicate somewhat the spirit of Woodstock into the Burning Man festivals, but you're saying it's not quite the same. It has been industrialized in a sense. It doesn't have the emergent spirit that enveloped the first original Woodstock. Please, Nigel, what were you going to say from your experience?
In considering Woodstock, I'm reminded, and I remember hearing on the radio about this disaster area that was Woodstock because it had torrential rain at the time. And it was not a comfortable experience, but like Well was saying, in the people coming together, it seems like it summoned something else. And it reminds me that this might seem a strange analogy, but in my previous attempts at making things in metal, in soldering and brazing, it's not enough to bring the materials together. It needs a flux as a medium, so the cleaning up and whatever's needed to allow the merging. And it seems like intrinsic to the coming together is that it summons something else. Mm. Often through the difficulty of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, let me try and bring to this another distinction and see how you want to play with that. So, So in my contemplation about the different togetherings that we humans create, there is the example. So suppose we are a team in the NBA, and what we really want to do is to win the basketball championship. So we are playing together, and we have a certain goal, a certain objective. If we are an orchestra, and say we want to play the Brahms Fourth Symphony, again, we have an objective that brings us together, and we're trying to do something.
Yes.
If we are members of Robert Perry teams on the journey to the North Pole, then we don't mind being one of the earlier teams who are heading ahead of him to place and create these provisions, landmarks, such that his team would be able to travel light to accomplish the mission. We understand that we have a part to play inside a bigger mission. So in this case, I'm describing, whether it's an NBA team, whether it's an orchestra, whether it's reaching the North Pole, I'm describing different scenarios where there is some kind of an exterior task or mission or accomplishment we are working together to achieve. The NASA team endeavoring to put out the Apollo program, and on and on and on. And you could obviously, in that category of an external outcome, put any activist group and potentially any startup endeavor in the business and technology space. So that's case one. We come together around wanting to accomplish and do something outside of ourselves. Perhaps create a product, perhaps reach somewhere. That's case one. Case two is a different case, is one where there isn't a shared intention about something outside of us. There is a shared intention about us together and what it is that we may be able to create, and where, again, there may be different variations, but there is an emphasis on perhaps how the togethering that we are creating creates possibility for each and every person to discover themselves, to unlock their talent, to liberate their skills, to discover how they can contribute to that communal endeavor. Now, you can say, well, Aviv, it's not a big difference. It's one is pointing out, the other is pointing in, but it's still working towards something. I find that there is a distinction there that's helpful for me. And then I find that perhaps you could say, well, there is a third case. And the third case is when the two actually get combined together. So, and perhaps the example for that will be some kind of a spiritual or religious or evolutionary endeavor where there is an exterior dimension and there is an interior dimension. And so I'm proposing that part of the current that brings us together, like in the example well offered, the village comes around the well dressing in the shared gratitude and appreciation of the source of water. In a different circumstance, people will come together around the shared value of a different kind. They want to win the game, they want to accomplish something. And in the religious sense, people come together to celebrate not the water source, but what they believe to be another kind of source that they want to share together. I am observing that the sense of shared intention creates some of the character of the togethering. And that is true, I believe, whether the shared intention is there in the first place and is what brings us together, or whether we come together to discover what is the shared intention we may be able to give birth to. What comes alive for you when I'm trying to observe, to detect the quality of togetherings in relation to the aim, the purpose, the shared intention that instigate the togethering?
Yeah, that's very, very interesting, Aviv, because if you go back to the very real example of what has happened in life itself and the evolution of life, then clearly there must be an intention at play somewhere within that to make things better, to better make. Because the actual trace of it tells us that it has got better. Life has become more capable, finer, fuller, more full of variety and possibility as it has evolved. So somewhere behind that, there's a causative intention.
Yeah.
What I would note at this point is if human beings were to come together with the same like kind intention, what would become possible there? Just wishing to improve the possibility of life, which I believe intrinsically we all want to do. What if that was our core motivation? And we joined, if you like, the process of evolution as players, not simply as the result of it, in the life that we're living.
To the degree that you can, how would you narrate, how would you describe in language the shared intention of life?
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. Yeah. One of the things that is clear to see inside it is that something keeps it going and maintains it and keeps it fresh. Yeah, so there's a healing possibility in life that heals itself. There's a regenerative possibility that gets you up in the morning and, with a fresh impetus each day. Yeah, and it clearly wants new to be possible and makes new possible in all sorts of ways and maintains what is already there. Yeah, sometimes you could say way beyond the call of duty. Yeah, when we make it very difficult sometimes for things to maintain life, but it carries on. So there's a very durable continuity within it, which wants it to continue. And there's also a desire within it for it to be new and emergent at the point. These are incontrovertible facts just from observing what life is like. And you can see it very clearly, for example, in the emergence of a new life when a baby is born. It is so absolutely overflowing with vitality. Not yet very fully formed or able to do much, but the vitality within it is tangible. And when people are doing something that they love to do and doing that together, there is also a flood of vitality into it. So it's almost like something is trying to get us to understand what it's at and to get us to invest in it from our own self-rising volition, because we also want to make things better.
So I'm experiencing three core natures in the language you're offering to the shared intention of life. Intention one is to continue. It wants to continue. It doesn't want to ever stop. This universe doesn't want to ever stop. But there is an intention 2 and 3 because it doesn't want to continue in an inert way. It wants intention 2 to, as you say, be vital, be fresh, make a new start. And then there is a third intention, which is it wants to continue to get better, to improve, to evolve its nature. So
Yes.
This is a very simple and yet potent way to sense these three core impulses of life: to continue, to be made new, to renew, to regenerate, and to update and upgrade a new, better, improved, evolved version.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the kind of insight that would cause somebody to start a religion, not not suggesting anything, right?
I see it more as a movement,
Yeah.
but a human arising movement. Most movements in the world are against something. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a movement for something, for the future of life? Yeah.
Yeah. I think there is a religion in the world, but it's misunderstood. It's given the term competition, which is at its bottom level. It seems to be just wanting to dominate another, but at its apex or highest point, it's a sharing of passion to be better. And you can see that in, say, top tennis players coming together because they're so in love with the passion of playing the game, they will get together with another to resist them. And it's as though, whilst we've each got a soul, when we come together, we become the soil for each other's growth. But I don't think the world understands it really. At its high end, it's a shared passion of wanting to be better. Yeah, but it's translated at a low level.
You are describing very much the original Olympic spirit. That was the Olympic movement. The Olympic movement was the coming together to celebrate the excelling of the human capacity to be faster, to jump higher or to a greater distance, and so on and so forth. That was what the games were about. And I suppose you could say that it's a convergence of that with economics that drove the competition that you are proposing is the current religion, which is very much, coincides very much with the extractive capitalist economy that evolved over the last several centuries, where we measure our gross domestic product as the success and value measure of our togetherings, which means we have become homo economicus. We've been looked at as economic units as the primary value with which we measure life, success, and the meaning and purpose of what we're here to produce. Yeah,
I'm very much caught by a word that you just used, which is excel, because I'm often looking for words to characterize the three levels of life, and it seems like excel fits in that the first level of being born and initial growth is one of extract. You extract from that which is around you, a bit like the way that the digestive system works. But then in the later growth, it's exchange, where it's a process of give and take with others. But then there is this hard to see or hard to characterize third level, which is the religious urge to excel that lives in all of us, but is almost hard to see. It's a feeling registration at first. So, excel, yeah.
What would you imagine, Nigel, in a gathering of people coming together where that became more of the primary impulse, the desire, the natural instinct that we humans are here to excel in the sense of communion, in the sense of realizing our higher potential? What would be some of the natures that will accompany a together-ing like that?
Yeah, the first thing that comes up is mutuality of support. Because in the world, it's like people come together, but then they climb over each other to get to the top. But my experience over recent years has been discovering a mutuality of support in people, where they're not so, yes, they are personally interested in their own growth, but the personal growth happens as a result of the support for each other. And it's almost counterintuitive to the ways of the world, but I think it's totally natural that one would want the best for all life and then find it in oneself.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Nigel. It's a marvelous thing when something like this actually happens, because what tends to happen in me, for example, I'll speak for myself, is that I love the fact that something is emerging in someone else that is enhanced and better. And I don't mind who it's emerging in. If it's emerging in me, great. But if it's emerging in someone else, that's also great. Because fundamentally, I'm in support of life itself and life's progression in whoever and wherever it can happen. And that's one of the phenomena that comes with it, which is very different to the competitive instinct for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Now, there's nothing wrong with competition when it produces better results.
Yeah.
Providing you don't get too possessive about the whole thing, you know?
Well, it's curious that you make this observation. I sensed a minute ago that we were going to conclude or heading towards conclusion, but I'll be remiss if I didn't bring this distinction and contrast to what we are describing, which is we are recording this midway through 2024. It's a year when more people around the world than any other year will go to some kind of a local or national election and to vote for establishing the government. And in one way, it is an extraordinary achievement in the story of life that people have come together around some kind of a liberal democracy system, one where people can elect the government rather than the governing, ruling power is going from one generation to the next of what you once, Nigel, described as the roughest, most cruel dude in the district who able to establish their monarchy. So that said, in one way it's an extraordinary achievement. In another way, we are also seeing the very concept of democratic system is in struggle in many places around the world. Number one, which is exhibiting itself by the reappearance of in some countries autocratic leaders who are gradually, effectively breaking down the institutions of liberal democracies. And we're also seeing that the very bug that has not yet been worked out of the system, which is part of why the system is breaking down, is this idea that to succeed in the political game, you have to destroy the other party in order to win. So we're speaking here of high and lofty ideas and the celebration of life together, which is so inspirational and compelling. And at the same time, when we observe the story of the human progress in working to create for itself institutions of government, it's pretty messy and pretty difficult. And right now we are at a point where it seems to be entering a major crisis all at the same time, while we are facing planetarily a bunch of crisis points. So this probably sounds like a whole other conversation, but I felt like dropping this reality inside the blissful tone with which we're describing the possibility of finer, more elevating togetherings, for you to just offer a comment on this before we close.
Yeah, it looks to me as though we've been hijacked by the mental realms, because the urge to grow, I feel, is a feeling that's intrinsic to human life. But in England, there's been a whole forced development of the mental life that it kind of endorses hierarchy. And one of the things that seems to come out of it is this obsession with winning, personally winning. And I can see, unfortunately, the development of the mental life often occurred by the conscious cruelty that caused people not to feel, caused young men to avoid feelings. And somehow I feel like we need to grow the feeling life. Yeah. Which means accepting not just the good side, but also accepting the pain that we seem to each carry.
And causing each other.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, it compounds, yes.
Yeah, I do agree with what you're saying, Nigel, in the sense that I think the future is going to arise probably more from feeling and coming together in feeling than from further mental innovation.
Yeah.
So obviously that has its place. Yeah. I mean, I worked for many years in systems, for example, and systems are great if the system serves the function that it was designed for, rather than people become slaves of a system where they lose any sense of the system is there for them. And therefore they need to improve it and make it better so that it better serves its purposes into the future and doesn't become a governing agency upon them. preventing their life. And this is often what happens. You know, we have a good idea, we put it into practice, and then the idea takes over, as it has with economics, and many other things in life, and I would say also in science. You know, science and its innovation is a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
But it's become so systemized that it's very difficult to make real innovation inside it. Because it becomes self-confirming in the way that it works.
Yeah.
So that's the problem in many areas.
Well, so how about if we bring it to a pause here with this wave, where we started today with welcoming life and the openness to life and the nature of life pulling us together in the first place, because life wants to express more of itself, and it gets to express more of itself in the coming together of its different parts. And that led us into a variety of observations coming together in this idea that the different togetherings that we create can facilitate the excelling of our greater potential in a whole range of different ways. And that brought us to, in the end, a reflection of the achievement, the crowning achievement, and also the great strife and struggle of our species. So evolving together is a real thing, is a real core element of the evolutionary story and the story of life. And if you stayed with us, we invite you to be part of that exploration. Nigel, I see you want to drop in another thing at the end, please.
Yeah, I just want to log something maybe for future exploration, in that, like Well, my first training in life was as a scientist. I loved physics, which allowed me to discover the wonder of the form. But it also led me to realize that life is not the form. Life is what can come through the form. And the life cannot be seen with the microscope or the telescope, but you can feel it. So it's making the distinction between life and what is often persuaded us to think is life.
With those seeds and starters, let the conversation continue. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Till next.
Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.